Well, it's week 16 in our Bible readings, and we've actually got quite a few chapters this week, but a lot of them are very short chapters because we're going to be in the Psalms. But week 16, here's what it is comprised of. First Samuel, chapters 25 to 31, we'll finish First Samuel, and then Second Samuel, chapters 1 through 4. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, the book of Samuel is just one book. What we have in our English Bibles, it's the same material. We just break it down into two books. So there's a continuity of story. But also, we're going to read 25 of the Psalms. So just buckle up and don't worry. It's really not that much. Let's do a quick overview of First Samuel chapters 25 to 31. You're going to read about the death of Samuel in chapter 25. And then a very sad turn in David's life, I believe. It's where he begins to take multiple wives. Now, I want to emphasize this for a moment. There's a principle in Scripture called the descriptive and the prescriptive. Just because the Bible describes something doesn't mean that it's saying that it's good or acceptable. David was a man after God's own heart, but he was still a sinner. So marriage, as God defines it back in Genesis 2, as well as Jesus and Paul going back to Genesis 2, is this. God made people in his image. He makes them male or female. That's it. And marriage is between one male and one female. That's it. Anything outside of those bounds is sin against the Lord. You say, but David, he's married multiple women. That's called polygamy. Yes, and it was wrong. It was sin. And when you look at David's life from this point on, there's a lot of turmoil there. There's a whole lot of turmoil. So I just want to emphasize that we see David becoming a polygamist, and it's not good. But chapters 26 through 30, Saul is continuing to pursue David. He just will not give up. It gets so bad where it says that the Spirit of God has departed from Saul. He seeks the counsel of a medium, or I think in the King James Version it says a witch. He wants to summon up the spirit of Samuel from the dead because he can't get any word from the Lord. So this is how far Saul went. It's just such a sad decline. But he pursues David and won't give up. But in 31, we're going to read of Saul's death and that of his son Jonathan too. Very sad chapter, and it will be very heartbreaking for David. In fact, in 2 Samuel, chapters 1 through 4, you'll read in chapter 1 of David being heartbroken over the death of Saul and Jonathan. In fact, the person who says, well, I killed him, he pays for it with his own life. I know I'm giving away too many details. But in chapter 2, even after Saul has died, there are people in his line and people connected with him that continue to pursue David. They just won't relent. He is ultimately, David that is, made king over Judah. Now the kingdoms aren't divided yet, but he's simply seen as king over Judah. And Ishbosheth, one of the sons of Saul, is made king over Israel. That's not going to turn out very well. In chapters 3 and 4, David multiplies wives. I mean, it's just getting worse and worse there. And he has more children, which we're always grateful for children, but sin is never the means by which we want to see that happen. Look, when it happens, we still want to see those children brought into the world. But David is just multiplying his troubles for later on. And his battles with Saul's line continues. And you'll read about that. But let's quickly shift here to the Psalms. And I'm only going to talk about one in particular. But let me say this about the whole collection of the Psalms that we're going to be reading this week. These are written during the years when Saul is pursuing David. So here's what you're going to see a lot of. David is crying out to the Lord. He is in anguish. I mean, wouldn't you be the man that you just want to serve as king? The man that you love and his son you love, he's your closest friend. You're married to one of the king's daughters, and this guy is just looking to kill you? Well, that's what you're going to read about in almost all of these Psalms. There's some where David is rejoicing in the Lord, but a lot of them are just like, Lord, what's going on? And Lord, where are you? But I want to emphasize Psalm 16. This one's big. Because in that particular psalm, David talks about the Lord not letting his Holy One undergo decay. So somebody's going to die, but they're not going to stay dead. And you say, well, who was David talking about? Well, when Peter preaches his sermon at Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, Peter says David wasn't talking about himself. Who was he talking about? He's talking about the Christ, the Messiah. And by the time we're in Acts chapter 2, Peter says, that's Jesus. I love how the Old Testament preached the gospel, the same gospel we have in the New Testament. Also in Acts chapter 13, you'll see that referred to again, where God will not let his Holy One, his Messiah, stay dead. But he is going to die, but he's going to be raised. See, all of it is about Jesus. All of it is pointing to him. And yes, even in the Old Testament, it preached the resurrection. So that's your overview for this week. I hope it goes well for you. Stay at it. It is worthwhile. Next week will be a third of the way through. Can you believe that? But nonetheless, I wish you God's grace and peace in the coming days.